trains, who provides that command of control at the company trains?
Pardon me, ma'am. It's the maneuver first arm.
Yes, the maneuver first sergeant within that maneuver battalion, they have command and control of the company trains, right? So what type of support elements are in these company trains? When I say, so let me back up. When I say support, what type of FSC elements would you find here? Remember, it's not the way or this is, Captain Jarzin's way, but I'm just trying to give you an idea what could be at the company trains. And it varies from commander to commander. So I'm sorry?
Man, Lieutenant Boswell, field maintenance team.
Yes, the field maintenance team would be here, right?
Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Whalen. That's like the LRP, right? Like all
No,
those like individual LRPs.
no, we will actually go into that. And who was that? Ethan Whalen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we will go into it.
Okay, so with um the other Captain Jarzin, he had the LRP like in that setup, like right here, like this, right behind the frontline elements, would be the LRP, then the CTCP.
Would you say like right here, like in this area?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So listen, Waylon, you had to remind me because I'm going to remind everyone. I have a memory of a goldfish. We will talk about the LRPs, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So we're going to talk about the elements, and we're going to talk about the distribution and how that looks like. So yes, you have the FMTs in each of the company trains. What else?
The medevac, ma'am.
The 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 evacuation teams, yes. But where does those evacuation teams come from?
They come from the
HHC, ma'am.
Yes, HAC of what?
The maneuver element, ma'am.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, perfect. So let me show my notes. So yes, you have the evacuation teams. Yes. What else? What other support is here in the company trains?
We have a CCP there, ma'am.
The casualty collection point, yes. The casualty collection points would be here. But those are points, though.
Feeding elements.
Yes.
The salt kitchen.
Yes. That's a moon right there. So I would have I know this is not doctrinally sound, but those are the AKs. The field feeding teams. Where are the field feeding teams come from?
They come from the FSC, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, perfect. Love it. Okay. So, and again, right, it varies from company commander to company commander and the type of relationship that maneuver battalion commander or squadron wants, right? So I'm just using Captain Jarzin, me, as showing my example of how I do things, right? And I'm not saying this is the way, but it just shows that, again, I want to reiterate this. Us as logisticians, we had to improvise, right? That's part of one of those principles of logistics, right? Improvisation. Um, not everything can be one way, right? Even though doctrine says one thing, and that situation or that battle space might not be conducive for the doctrine way, okay? So just be open-minded and at the end of the day, you have to figure out, how do I best support my customer? The customer is the warfighter, okay? That is our sole job as logisticians. You know, when you move throughout your Army career, the one thing you had to remember is that our job, our sole mission is to provide that support. And if you're in the sustainment brigade, that sustainment to the warfighter, okay? That's the one thing I need you to internalize, okay? Nothing else. Everything else is second.
Could you just send me that slide over MSK?
So now we're moving, now we're going backwards to the CTCP, right? What does the CTCP stand for?
Combat Trains Command Post, ma'am.
Perfect. Who provides that command and control of that CTCP or that mission command?
Ma'am, it's the maneuver HHC commander.
Yes, perfect. So so this is the area, right? So we got the who, right? It's the HAC company commander of that maneuver element, right? And second is where they're operated out of is the CTCP. What is inside the CTCP?
Row 1 medical, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, what is that also called? Oopsies. What is that called?
Class 3 and Class 5, ma'am?
So we're still, before we go into the class 3, class 5, when we say role 1, there's another word for it.
That's the battalion aid station, ma'am.
Yes, the battalion aid station is here. Oh my god, I am so, I gotta get a bamboo. BAS, the battalion aid station, right? That would be, actually, it's inside the CTCP. I'm just writing this out here because it's more clear for you to see. Okay, so what individuals are here in the CTCP? Individuals. I'm talking more of staff. I did not mention it this morning, so that's my bad. Go ahead.
S4, ma'am?
Yes, the S4 is here. Yes. The S4 is here. What is that first lieutenant doing?
It controls the sustainment support from the combat train.
Yes. So the S4 yes, you're correct. So I'm trying to articulate it in a way that it is more clear. The S4 does set the priorities, right? They set the priorities of what type of support that goes into each of these maneuver battalions, or I'm sorry, wow, maneuver companies, right? The S4 but help provide that insight of what priorities needs to go out into the company, into the maneuver companies or troop. I'm going to say that again because that probably confused you. The S4 helps set priorities, right? And coordinates what type of logistics requirements are needed for each of the maneuver companies. Because that S4 is in that maneuver battalion staff. That S4 is a maneuver guy or gal. He or she is one of these guys. The FSC does not have an S4, right? So that S4 is a maneuver person, and so they understand how to speak tactically. They know how a maneuver company operates. Okay? So they help coordinate the logistics. And so then let me ask you this, right? Who helps, or who manages at the company level, the maneuver companies, who manages that the support, right, at the company level, the maintenance and the support here at the company level?
Ma'am, isn't it usually between the first sergeant and the company XO?
Yes, yes, that is a correct answer. Yes. So, and the company XO, because the first sergeant, right? Believe it or not, they handle beans, bullets, and bandages, right? Because then those platoon sergeants report. Those platoon sergeants would have to talk to their squad leaders, their team leaders, like, hey, does Private so and so have all their classes of supply? Like, do they have enough ammo? Do they have enough water? Do they have enough um food to last them for X amount of days, right? And so that gets reported up to the first sergeant, and it's a joined coordination with the first sergeant and that company XO. Okay. And so I'm going to be using the word LOGSTAT, and you're going to learn that from the other Captain Jarzen after we wrap up the recap. Okay. So that company XO sends all that report, right? The LOGSTAT. LOGSTAT. It's a LOGSTAT statistics report. Like, hey, um, does everyone have everything that they need to continue mission, right? Water, um, MREs, and ammo, like those big things, right? And that gets sent to the S4. Okay. That's why the S4 is important here, because they are closer to the fight, right? That S4 is collecting that data, the log stat. Hey, is Alpha Company green? Is Bravo Company green? Is Charlie Company green? Okay, they're compiling all that, and usually the log stats, usually, right? Um, it's sent twice a day, one in the mornings and one in the evenings. Okay, and so to say again, the HAC company commander of that maneuver element is providing that command and control at that CTCP. And the S4 is there, the medical platoon is there as well. And um Captain Lasky, he did say one thing, right? Sometimes the it really varies. I say again, it varies from commander to commander. Sometimes you have that FTC element co-located in the CTCP. Okay. Sometimes sometimes in the striker, and I've seen it more relevant in the heavy divisions like the striker BCT and the armor brigade combat teams, right? I've seen it where the FTCP is co-located. It's occupying the same space, same area as the CTCP. So let's go with that scenario. If the FTCP is co-located in the CTCP, what do you think happens to that area? Say like we're in a contested environment. What does that mean? What do you think is going to happen? We're in a contested. When I say contested environment, we're in the danger zone. We're engaging the enemy. We're conducting large scale ground combat operations where it's tank on tank battle, and unfortunately we're losing a lot of lives. Like if the FTCP is co-located to the CTCP and it's very close to the FLOT, what do you think is going to happen?
It's
Ma'am,
moved
within the
back.
Rodriguez, I imagine you have to relocate it further back to the rear.
No, we yes, you're heading into my segue point. But if you have just just let me rephrase the question. The FTCP is inside the CTCP. What's going to happen to the area?
Traffic, ma'am.
It's so okay. We're on the right track. So traffic, yes. So what's going to happen to the area? Is it going to get bigger or smaller?
It's gonna be a larger footprint, ma'am.
Yes.
Bigger.
Yes. So what does that mean? If it's going to be a larger footprint, what does that mean?
More mess.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a hot mess. Oh yeah, but what's going to happen to our defense?
Defense would be hard to set it up.
Yep, it's going to be harder to set up because you have so much stuff in here. Because remember, the FTCP has a lot of the support capabilities, right? You have those big trucks, those PLSs, all that other stuff. And so we had to think as logisticians, right? If that maneuver battalion commander or squadron commander is saying like, hey, I want you, me, right? For example, Vic, I need your FTCP co-located to the CTCP, right? I'm like, Roger, sir, I'll give you what you want, but you always have to explain what are the costs, because he or she is relying on me for my expert opinion. That's why the FSCs are created, right? That's why the BSBs are created and the sustainment brigades are created, because we provide that senior logistics advice to that maneuver element. So the drawback is that, Roger, we can do that, but you understand that we're going to expand your footprint, but we're in a contested environment. And he's going to say like, oh my God, you're right. Because that means that the enemy, right, because they have aerial assets, they can see us and they can start attacking the CTCP. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
So there's always drawbacks to everything, right? And so then going into what Lieutenant Rodriguez, perfect segue, is that then you have the FTCP before we go into different philosophies, right? What does the FTCP stand for?
Ma'am, it's the Field Trains Company Post or Command Post.
Command post, yes. The Field Trains Command Post. Who provides that command and control, that mission command of that FTCP?
It's the FSC commander, ma'am.
Yes. I'm going to put a heart. That's me right there. Okay. So the FSC, right? That's where I'm located, the FTCP. And so this is, and going back to what Captain Lasky said, he is absolutely correct. Either the FTCP will be co-located at the CTCP, or they will be located at the BSA, right? What does the BSA stand for?
Brigade support area, ma'am.
The brigade support area, yes. And so either then you'll see this, then that FTCP will be co-located inside the BSA. But like I said, us as logisticians, we have to improvise. We have to adapt to the current situation and environment, right? Because the enemy always has a vote. So here's a little bit of storytelling to emphasize the improvisation. So my battalion commander, like I said, right, it's always about relationship. How does your relationship affect? It doesn't affect how you support your customer, right? So thank God I had a great relationship with my maneuver battalion commander. And so so I said, sir, and I remember from one of the meetings that we had in the training meetings, he wants to have a smaller footprint because he was tired of getting hit all the time, right, from enemy. And so I said, okay, sir, we can set up our own FTCP behind the CTCP. And he said, so you mean, are you going to be at the BSA? I'm like, no, sir, I'm not. I will set up my own FTCP behind you, right? And so tell me, just going back to principles of logistics, in order for me to do this, what did I have to do at first? In order to make this successful, what is the one thing that I needed to set up an FTCP behind the CTCP?
Improvise.
Yes. How did I improvise? So what other principles of logistics that is very important?
Integration.
At this point, so when you say integration, what do you mean by that? Integration, when you say integration, what do you mean by that? There's another one I'm looking for.
Ma'am, is it survivability?
It's survivability. It's survivability. And to read off the definition is all aspects of protecting personnel, weapons, and supplies while simultaneously deceiving the enemy. Must sometimes rely on the use of redundant sustainment capabilities and alternative support plans, right? So having that conversation with my battalion commander, and he wanted a small footprint, that tells me, right? Because he wants a commander to help think through things for him, because he's good at what he does, which is trigger pulling, right? For me, what I'm good at is is maintaining support for him. So that was my job. You have to understand that they rely on us for our expertise, right? And so I'm not saying, oh, Captain Jarson's so smart. I'm not saying that. It's my team that made it happen. So survivability. Where do you think I got my how did I protect myself? Where do you think I protected myself when I had to do the FTC or created the FTCP? We have to think through this. Where would I get how was I able to protect my personnel and my equipment, my support from my battalion?
You had to set up your own defense, ma'am?
I had to set up my own defense, yes. And so the next thing I'm going to say to you, this is real world stuff, right? Is that no matter what battalion commander or squadron, they will not provide their own protection assets, right? To protect the logistics. Because they feel like that they can use those assets, right, for the fight here to engage the enemy. So then that was my job for me as an FSC commander to figure out how can I protect myself, right? And so, and Captain Jarzen can go into it. It was a long process, but I figured out that I can, according to my MTO, right, that I was authorized or use in lieu of, right, the Humvees that I have, I can request gun trucks, right? And so I started to create teams, right, within my company on how to do their own convoy protection platforms. So I can depend on myself, right, instead of using assets from the maneuver guys and gals for them not to provide. So I rather rely on myself instead of the maneuver guys, where they can use those assets to engage the enemy. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. So, and Captain Lasky said perfectly. So if I'm protecting my own FTCP, what is the cost of me protecting my own area?
You have fewer assets to provide logistic support with, ma'am?
Exactly. That is correct. And so what I did was that during you'll go through especially active duty folks, right? Before any unit, before any brigade goes to JRTC, NTC, JMRC, JMRC is located in Europe, they have to go through a brigade exercise, right? So this is the rehearsal to the rehearsal to the rehearsal. And so I understood that, hey, my maneuver battalion guys, they can't provide security for me. I rather do it myself. So I ran smaller convoys. Oh, let me back up. I ran smaller convoys to the company trains. And so what do you think the cost of that is? That I'm constantly running smaller convoys back and forth, back and forth. What do you think that's the cost of to the soldiers?
The soldiers are on the road more often, possibly getting fatigued. You're also wearing down the equipment faster.
Yep,
So
exactly.
increased maintenance cost, ma'am.
Yep, exactly. And so you have to understand as a logistician that there's cost to everything, right? But on the flip side, my maneuver companies were constantly supported. They got everything that they needed, but at the cost for me, right? Even though the maneuver companies, they were, when you'll hear green, amber, green, amber, black, right? Green means that they are good to go on all classes supply. Amber, they're like, it depends on unit to unit. I would say 40 to 75%, right? But it varies to unit. And black, meaning that they're about to run out of supplies quick, right? And that's a no-go. And so my support units were constantly in the amber, which is fine to me and my battalion commander, right? If people say are green, that they're lying. We will never achieve this ever again, right? Because remember, we are in the large scale ground combat operations. No one unit will be ever green, okay? And so that's like a mutual thing that's understood. And so my maneuver battalion is happy, right? Overall. But my soldiers, even though they're distro, I had to rely on maintenance, right? To help pull for convoys. So I had 2 platoon leaders to include so I had my company XO, my distro platoon leader, and my maintenance platoon leader. Both of my platoon leaders were doing convoys constantly because I did not want to burn out just only distro platoon leader, or I don't want to only burn out my distro platoon. So I had my maintenance company, or not, my maintenance platoon to also help integrate, right? That's good. Into these convoys. Okay. So does that make sense of how you can start seeing how unit distribution is starting to come together? Any questions, comments, concerns so far? Confusing? Good to go? No? Any comments? Concerns? Interesting. Okay. Am I losing you guys? You guys got to speak up.
No, ma'am, still here.
Okay. Unit distribution, supply point. Oops. And LRP. Oh, wow. Not LRP, throughput. Okay. So within the FTCP, right? And of course in the definition, have redundant capabilities. So if I had my FTCP co-located into the CTCP and this gets wiped out, who's going to provide that support to the maneuver companies, right? So we have to think about that. And so that is something that everyone has to understand. There's always a cost to everything. If one person wants it, we have to explain what is the cost, right? So my maneuver battalion commander and I felt comfortable to have it separate because my maneuver battalion, they were always the main effort. There's always main effort and supporting effort, MESE, right? For everything. And so he relied on me, and I was his redundant capability, meaning that if the CTCP, say like the enemy penetrated, right? And the companies have to retrograde back, right? Retrograde back. And the enemy is actually moving forward or coming towards us, right? The enemy. The CTCP can actually fall back into the FTCP because I was providing that redundant capability, because I'm providing that mission command, right? And so it's just a fallback position. This is why, this is me, I prefer it this way. It helps me get integrated into their operations, okay? So the survivability is a big thing. how are we able to protect ourselves while supporting? That's a question you always have to ask yourself when conducting logistics. How can I protect myself? How can my soldiers protect themselves while they're providing that sustainment, or I'm sorry, that support? Because logistics, we are a soft target. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So, I'm sorry, people are like texting me. And so I have the rest of, if my distro platoon and my maintenance platoon, and I have the rest of my maintenance platoon conducting small security, right? It's good enough because I'm always jumping, because I have to keep up. Me as a company forward support company commander, it's my job to keep up with the maneuver guys and gals, right? So in JRTC, I had to jump 10 times in a 12-day span. It was a lot, right? There's a reason why we had to do it that way, because my battalion always kept engaged. They're always engaging the enemy. They're kicking butt, and they're exploiting the initiative, right? However, here in the BSA, right, this is where relationships, play a key role of how support is being conducted for the customer. So who's in charge of the BSA?
The BSP commander, ma'am.
So what type of capability is within the BSA?
You have your alpha company, so your distro platoon, water and fuel platoons, trans platoon, supply platoons.
No, so I'm sorry. This is my bad. Yes. So what type of companies? I just want to just solely on companies.
So you got your Charlie company, so your medical.
Yep, Charlie Med. Who else?
Alpha company.
Yep, Alpha Distro. Yep.
Bravo company and headquarters.
Yes, Bravo Maintenance. Yes. Bravo Maintenance. And HAC. Okay. And so they provide what type of role of care Charlie Med provides?
Roll 2 mil.
Yeah. Roll 2. Okay. So now here we're going to talk about, okay, before I go into the methods of distribution, I don't want you guys to be shy. Like I said, there's no such thing as a stupid question, right? Anything that needs to be clarified, questions, comments, concerns. I want to hear you guys talk. Like I said to you all on the first day, I hate hearing myself talk. I want to hear you guys talk so I can see where you're at.
Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Muncie.
Go ahead, Muncie.
I just want to know, as far as the TAC log exam, what kind of questions?
No, we're not going to go there. We're not going to go there.
Okay.
Here's the question, Muncie. You have to draw the trains from memory and illustrate every class of supply flowing to and from the flot.
Too easy, sir.
All of it. Everything.
I should clarify that please don't ask questions about the test itself.
Understood, ma'am.
Okay.
May I have a question
for clarification? Who's this? Lieutenant Potts, ma'am. Go ahead, Potts.
So I understand we went over what each train is composed of, but could you briefly restate the FTCP and what support that they have there?
Oh, so if we look back into the slides, right? So what's inside the FSC? If anyone can help out Potts.
Ma'am, inside an FSC, you have a headquarters section which contains the cooks, distribution platoon,
Yep.
and a mechanic maintenance platoon.
Yep. There we go. Does that answer your question, Potts?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes.
Ma'am, Lieutenant Dodd, so
Lieutenant Dodd?
you're running log packs.
Yes.
Would it be feasible to have your maintenance platoon as your primary security for that, or are they also participating in the log packs?
Ooh, good question. Good question. And so I did both. Because I did not want to burn out my distro platoon, and I had to rely on my maintenance platoon to help augment that support, right? And so, and someone mentioned this, who else is the personnel, right? Who else is in the FSC? Someone said it just now. So we have mechanics, we have the truck drivers, right? The fuelers. Who else are you? Someone just said
Field
it.
feeding section, ma'am.
Who are in the field feeding section?
The cooks.
The cooks. I used my cooks to provide security. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because and that's one of the things that we have to understand, right? Hey, if my maneuver battalion is constantly on the fight, they're chasing the enemy, right? They're doing great things for our country. But do you think, let me ask you this, do you think my cooks have time to cook?
No, ma'am.
No. Nope. Mm-mm. So I made sure that everyone is 100% employed. So does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yep. All hands on deck, right? And so this is good. I like this. Any other questions? Comments, concerns, clarification?
I have a question, ma'am.
Who is this?
This is Lieutenant Lasky.
Oh, go ahead, Lieutenant Lasky.
Would your FTCP pulling its own security be considered base cluster interlocking with the BSA security? How does that work?
So, good question. So if I'm not able to provide that security for myself, right, they would have to be co-located, not necessarily inside the BSA, but they are integrated in their overall BSB defense plan. That probably did not answer that question.
Absolutely not at all.
I'm sorry. You wanna go into it?
Yeah. So what you can do if you're strapped for Joes and Joettes for security is called base cluster method. It's very common between the BSA, the BEB, and the field artillery units. So, because typically they're all towards the rear. So if they're all not combined in one giant massive perimeter, they'll set up what's called a base cluster where they'll be near each other. They'll have their own perimeters, and then they'll establish a joint security plan, kind of. So they have interlocking sectors of fire between each little base cluster, but they don't have to worry about PFC Snuffy, who's got 2 hours of sleep and is all jacked up on monsters, accidentally letting the 240 ride, popping off a couple desk pops into their wire. So it prevents friendly fires by making the bases have a joint security plan with interlocking sectors of fire. So where her FTCP is with the field trains, in that lower quadrant from probably the 7 o'clock to the 9 o'clock, you wouldn't have security there because it would be interlocking with those who have security in the BSA, if that makes sense. requires a lot of coordination and planning to make sure your soldiers don't accidentally,
Flag
kill
each other.
somebody in between the interlocking bases. But it is a way.
Yes, sir, that makes sense. In the South Dakota Guard, that's actually a really common base cluster security for our ATs and stuff because we don't really work a lot with other companies. So that makes sense.
So any other clarification on just the placement, mission command, and who does what?
Hi, ma'am. I just had a quick question. Can you
Who's this?
reiterate? Oh, this is Second Lieutenant Lanster. My apologies.
Go ahead.
I was just curious. What does AK stand for again?
Oh, the assault kitchen.
Oh, it is. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the field feeding team, but my little mouse kind of did this thing right here.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to
Yeah,
clarify.
it's the assault kitchen. All right. Yes. So just like I said, there's doctrine way, but there's always a way to everything, right? We just have to pay attention to what we're doing in the battlefield, what phase of the operation, because it really changes. We have to be fluid. We have to adapt and improvise, right? But at the end of the day, the question you always have to ask yourself: how can I protect myself? And how can my soldiers increase their survivability when conducting support to the customer? All right, and so at this point, right, well, I was running smaller convoys to each of the company trains, right, and my FTCP was probably, no crap, 12 kilometers away from the BSA. So I was far, far away from the BSA, right? So then I had my convoys, when they're done, they had to go all the way back to the BSA. And so that is something called supply point, right? So if I'm providing support forward, right, I'm going forward, it's called unit distribution, right? My method of distribution to the company trains is unit distribution. I'm providing support forward. I'm going forward, right? However, that's why I'm a little bit anti-BSB, right? So the alpha distro, I'm not saying all alpha distros are like this, but unfortunately I had to encounter this, right? Alpha distro refuses, right, to provide that unit distribution to me, right? But doctrinally, alpha distro is supposed to create that log pack to me, right? And I break that further down into each of the company's needs, right? Now, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, they're going to have different needs. Again, providing that support forward is called unit distribution. But Alpha Company, right? This all true story. In JRTC, Alpha Company distro, they refused to come towards me because they were scared of getting hit. They were not a T or proficient in convoy conducting convoys. So my guys and gals, they had to haul butt going backwards and pick up supply. When a unit, right, a sustain or a support element has to go backwards to pick up, it's called a supply point. Does that make sense? Unit distribution is forward, supply point is moving backwards.
Yes, ma'am.
Makes sense.
Yep. And so so my company did a lot of both, right? Unit distribution and supply point. I kept constantly moving forward, coming back, picking up, and just it was basically like a big circle, big round robin. Okay.
I have a question, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead. Who's this?
This is Lieutenant Zeroni.
Go ahead,
I had a
Zeroni.
question about that, the Alpha distro.
So
Mhm.
if they didn't want to go to supply you there at the FSC or at the FTCP, I mean,
Yep.
wouldn't they get trained or something? Isn't like that their job?
It is their. It was part of their job. It was part of their job. But the reason why, okay, so here's another thing. So to peel back the onion, right? So that JRTC rotation, all the FSCs were co-located, or what Captain Lasky said, they were co-located at the BSA. So you had Delta, Echo, Fox. I was Golf Company, right? G gangster. Golf, FGH.
This is Captain Jordan. This is F1 Alpine.
In India.
So I know pretty much everybody
Hold on,
across
I'm
all
sorry.
departments has had trouble trying to, for whatever reason, update their slides. For whatever reason, Teams is not working properly when it comes to PowerPoint. So
Actually, I'm going to put you
How do they
guys on a
so
10-minute break, okay?
You have your slide updates.
Yes, ma'am.
So come back at 14:30. 14:30. So 12-minute break.
Not email them to me.
Roger, man.
Well, you guys are on break. Does anybody have any questions of me? Go ahead. Yeah, basically. So the XSUM, I'll say not really. It's just to show you kind of an overview and how to use the documents. The CAT's full report has some information in it. That's good because it talks about crawl, walk, run, and how the Army thinks you should be training. So, I mean, it gives you a little bit of kind of big Army guidance as far as that goes. But I mean, if you have a micromanaging commander, they could easily just come down and squash all that and be like, I don't care what the Army says. This is what I say. So for the project, I mean, there's useful tidbits in there if you just read certain portions talking about how you're supposed to train in the strategy they say. The training event matrix, the biggest useful thing for it is it tells you how many training hours you're supposed to do for the events. So you know how long your events are supposed to last for your actual execution timeline. Not including recovery, but the actual event and, you know, going out and LARPing itself. There should be platoon events in there, like the toot and the squad event, and there should be platoon events in that whole matrix. Like those STTs, those sergeant's times trainings, those are not company events, and it outlines the hours and the frequency of those. No. I mean, it kind of varies. I've had sergeant's time training events that get done at 1400. I've had them get done at like 2000. That honestly, duty day wise, depends on your command guidance. Our command guidance was PT was sergeant's time training, regular day was sergeant's time training, and we didn't leave until all weapons and sensitive items were accounted for and better than the way that in better condition when they were turned in than when we issued them. So you'll have IMTO is just things that are on the property book. You know, it doesn't really account for expendable items. Like you may very well have a platoon range box that has weapons cleaning kits, ear pro, ping pong paddles, diamond washers for PMI drills. I mean, anything the supply sergeant could order, you know, something that you don't have to inventory as part of your platoon leader hand receipt, you can have those at your disposal. I mean, it's not going to be on the MTO because it's not really anything important. And then you have any training aids that you want to check out or get from TASC, the Training Aid Support Center. And then anything you may want to use as far as inside the battalion, you just have to list that as kind of an external resource. Like we used Buddy all the time for our platoon training, and Buddy was the medic's dummy that they used for CPR training. We used it for moulage kits, evaluated casualty, sergeant NPA. So we stole the medics dummies all the time. So don't think that you're limited to what FMS Web says you have. You can throw all those other stuff in there. Engineer tape, C-wire, pickets, stakes, sandbags, stuff like that. So the STX is supposed to be a turn up for your platoon FTX. Now, if you're planning on doing actual squad level exercises at squad level tasks, print off the TE and Os for those. If you're using the same tasks that you're using your FTX with, just brief that, and then when we get into the platoon FTX, you should be hitting the highlights. These are the critical leader, because those tasks are still going to be on the CONOP in the place where they're supposed to be. So you'll be briefing it. But then, since the actual certification event would be your platoon FTX, that's where you would turn that in as a deliverable. Now, if you wanted to highlight that you were going to certify on certain individual tasks, you could show the TE and Os for those. So you have kind of a quantifiable criteria of how you're going to do that. They can. I mean, they can also alter your FTX. You can say that you trained on those in those tasks on full run in the STX and you qualified on them, so you don't really need to focus them. So you can change different individual tasks that you're also going to train on and focus in your FTX, because if you trained on it, you certified on it, you're good. There's no sense in repeating it for the platoon FTX if you have other tasks that you want to train on. Does that make sense? Anybody else?
Sir, this is Lieutenant Cunningham. I have a question about the low density MOS training and finding the information on it. So I found the publications and everything for the specific MOS tasks for certain ones, but I cannot find anything on an 89 Bravo. Anything I can find is on A9 Alpha Warrant Officer.
That doesn't sound right. Sorry, my son's impersonating a dinosaur at the moment. Let me do a quick check. 89 Bravo is a super duper technical proficiency training style MOS. So I'm just gonna check real quick. It may not be in the actual order if you went numerically, because some of these do jump around. Yeah, looks like you're right. Looks like 89 Bravo is not on here for some reason. Let me check the ammunition.
Always looks like we got some company. You may want to get this show on the road.
All right. While Captain Lasky does that, so Hey everyone, we are back here again. Welcome back to my channel. I always like to say that. So I want to also say this too, is that Captain Rivera, he's also on the line, and he has multiple, like a lot of experiences. He was actually an observer controller out at NTC, the National Training Center, that is located in California, right? And so you'll see him put stuff on the meeting chat, and I'm telling you right now, he's giving you the answers to the test, right? And so, like I said, before a unit, right, a brigade goes to the Super Bowl meaning deployment, right? Whether it be Kuwait, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, wherever, right? They have to go through a rotation out at NTC or JRTC or JMRC, okay? And so Captain Rivera's role there, he was actually giving the report cards to those units, saying like, hey, you're good to go, you're ready, Godspeed, right? Or he would say, wow, you are all bunch of hot garbage. We need to retrain you guys again, right? So he'll be on the net just through meeting chat. And so if you have any questions throughout the afternoon, please shoot it out to him because he is such a great resource, okay? So again, his name is Captain Rivera. And he's also a TAC on our team. Great. Like Captain Lasky, Captain Miller, we have so many good TACs with so many different experiences. So just don't be afraid to reach out to them, okay? All right. So we are back here again. Can everyone still see my whiteboard?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, awesome. Okay, now we're gonna go into the more technical stuff, okay? So we talked about unit distribution. Me as Gulf FSC, my distro platoon, right? Or just for me at that time, JRTC, it was both my maintenance platoon and my distro platoon. They were conducting log packs, right? To the company trains, right? To each of the maneuver companies. So that was unit distribution. When you hear, hey, Gulf FSC is conducting unit distribution, so you know that Gulf FSC is providing forward support. They're moving forward with their support. They're dropping off the log packs, right? But when you hear Gulf FSC is conducting supply point, then you know, hey, then you'll know that I have elements from my company moving backwards, right? To pick up supplies from the BSA. Unit distribution forward, supply point backwards, okay? So now we're gonna talk about throughput. Throughput is bypassing a support echelon, okay? So say like my FSC completely gets wiped out, right? There's no FTCP, right? They're off the map because we're in large-scale ground combat operations and I didn't do my due diligence on protecting my soldiers, this and that. I'm completely wiped out. However, there still is a need of support to that maneuver battalion, right? So if that's the case, right, Alpha Distro would have to bypass, right? Oh, let me back up. I don't want to actually use that. Say like I am tied up. Gulf FSC is tied up and I can't reach to my companies in time, right? They need stuff now. And so I never did it, right? I'm just putting that out there. I'm just putting a scenario. If I'm tied up and I can't provide that unit distribution, then I said, hey, and I would reach back. Alpha Distro is commander talk. I would need your assistance on providing throughput to my to 214 Alpha company located here, right? So they're bypassing me, right? I don't use red. What do I use? Green. No. Orange. Okay. So they're bypassing me to go directly to the company trains. they're bypassing a support echelon. That's me, right? The FTCP, because I can do my job, right? So Alpha Distro is bypassing me to provide that support to the maneuver elements. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Unit distribution forward, right? Me, Captain Jarzen, or in her distro platoon, maintenance platoon, elements of both providing that forward support, me coming back, right? Picking up supply point, and throughput is bypassing. Think of Alpha Distro bypassing the FSEs, going straight to the customer. Or it could be the Sustainment Brigade, right? Like my husband mentioned, the Sustainment Brigade would bypass the BSA or bypass the BSB and go straight to the FSEs, right? They would bypass the BSB and going straight to the FSE. That would also be considered throughput. Make sense?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Oh my God. There we go. Okay. So we gotta talk. I'm going to talk about this 15 more minutes, and we're gonna go into LOGSTATs, and the other Captain Jarzen is gonna wrap up the Sustainment Brigade. Okay, so hang in there for 15 more minutes on the echelon trains. Again, I'm repeating myself because, like a broken record, you guys have to, and gals have to internalize this. Okay, once you understand the foundation, everything will make sense. I promise you. All right. So we have, I'm going to use these two phases of the operation. Which one do I want? Which one do I want? Let's try purple. So we got defense, right? And so you had to remember from yesterday's lesson, defense and offense. Okay. Say like we're in the defense, right? We're in the defense. This is a review. What type of classes of supply would be that would we need to provide that support if we're in the defense phase?
Class 4, ma'am.
Okay, class 4. What else? What else do you think would be?
Class 5, ma'am.
Okay, class 5. Yep. What else?
Class 1.
Class 1. Food. What else? Class 1B, right? We can't forget about water. So yes, those are the things that we do need to make sure of the different types of priorities of supply. So us as logisticians, right? We have to figure that out. And so I wrote down here underneath here priorities of support versus priorities of supply, right? So immediately everyone thought, hey, the priorities of supplies would be class 4 because we're in the defense. We have to build up our defense area, right? With sea wire, build berms to obstacles, all that other stuff, right? What else do you think? Oh no, someone did say class 3 because we're just sitting there eating up fuel before we can move before they move into the offense, right? So making sure that everyone's topped off on fuel. Perfect. So what about offense? What would you think be the priorities of supplies for offense?
Class 3 and class 5, ma'am.
Okay, class 3, class 5. What was that?
Class 8.
Class 3, class 5, and class 7.
Class 7, we don't. Class 7 is the overall end item. Class 7 is like the trucks, right? Hey, so what you're saying is that, hey, I'm going to give you another truck. That's not necessarily the case. So it would be class 3, class 5.
and medical evacuation.
Medical evacuation. Can you explain on that for me? What do you mean by that?
So, evacuate personnel who needs medical care.
Like medical supplies, yes. We would do that, but at the platoon, at the battalion aid station, and with the Charlie Med, they do have they have figured out how to provide that Class A resupply. Okay, so we got the priority supply, so I think everyone is on the same page for that. What do you think? What does this mean? Priority of support when it comes to the main effort and supporting effort. Did you guys learn? Did you all learn main effort, supporting effort in your commissioning source?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, so
Yes.
if you have, what does that mean? Explain to me, what is main effort, supporting effort?
The main effort is the element that's going to be provided with nearly most of the resources. So I would assume we can extend that to priority support, where the priority support will be the main effort, where that's where we're focusing on pushing our logistics assets towards.
Yes, that is correct. The main effort in regards to tactical operations is that in order to achieve mission success, that main effort needs to be reinforced with whatever they need, right? Say like they need to attack a hill, right? Or actually seize a town, right? Let's do that. Just seize a town, right? In order for us to achieve mission success, the main effort has to seize that town, right? And the supporting efforts will have to support that main effort, right? So, and us as logisticians, we have to figure out, hey, since Alpha Company is the main effort, I have to beef them up with Class 5, Class 1, Class 1B, and Class 3B, right? So they can achieve mission success. And I would have to tell, hey, Bravo and Charlie, I'm sorry, you're the supporting effort. You have to figure out how to. This is just a way, right? Not the way. I'm going to give you as much as I can after I resupplied Alpha Company, right? You might even have to cross-load ammunition. And it really depends on the mission that they have, okay? And so that does play a key role on who gets what at what time, right? Not everyone's going to get the same. I need everyone to understand, not everyone's going to get the same amount of supplies. And not everyone's going to be supplied at the same time, because my goal, I would tell my platoon leader or platoon leaders, hey, we have to supply Alpha Company first, right? Then you as platoon leaders, you guys are talking platoon leader to platoon leader, you would have to get in touch with those platoon, developing those relationships, right? With those platoon leaders, hey, is your platoon the one going in first, or is it second platoon or third platoon, right? So it's those things that you kind of have to build relationships with if you're down at the FSC level. Build those relationships with those maneuver platoon leaders, okay? And so yeah, who said that? Who answered my question correctly? Who was that? I'm sorry.
That was Lieutenant Benson, ma'am.
Yes, Lieutenant Benson, that is correct. So who is the main effort, supporting effort, and so on and so forth? It really dictates on who gets the supplies first, okay? And that goes along with the same thing with, if you go into the platoon level, it's the same thing. Not all platoons are going to get the same amount of stuff. And those platoons might not be at the same area. They might be in different areas too. So you have to figure out as platoon leaders, right? make those relationships where they're located at in the battlefield. This is why it's really important when you're doing any type of operations. Are we in the defense, offense, right? Who gets the priority of support and who gets the priority of supplies? Because when you are supporting the maneuver battalion, or squadron, that maneuver commander is going to be so busy commanding the fight, right? And so we have to figure out how can we best provide that support, because they're not going to tell us. It's definitely not going to be in op order. I'm telling you that right now. So time is now 14:55, and I'll hold fast, right? So this wraps up the recap of, oh no, LRPs. Waylon, you're supposed to remind me about LRPs.
Yes, ma'am, LRPs.
Yeah, see, there we go. All right, LRPs. Okay, let me write. What did it? What's a good one? Okay, let's use an LRP between the Alpha Distro and the FSC, right? Because there's room right here. LRP. What does LRP stand for?
Logistic release point.
Yes. Yes. You guys are all, and gals, are all correct. It's the logistics release point. Okay. I need everyone to understand this. The logistics release point is a pre-planned temporary. It's not a permanent. It's a pre-planned temporary location, a designated point on a map, and it's a mutual agreement between both receiving and distributing element, right? So Alpha Distro is going to meet me here at this LRP grid square, blah blah blah, and which is this LRP. You know, good practice would be closest to the receiving element, right? And so my distro PL, right, my distro platoon would meet Alpha Distro at a pre-planned temporary location to receive supplies or the log packs. It's the same thing here, right? Say like I can't reach all the way back to like actual in the company trains. I can go as far, me as the FSC, right? My PL maybe as far as right behind the company trains, but they're close enough to the receiving unit, right? So we have an LRP here, LRP here. It's a pre-planned, it's temporary location to exchange supplies. Someone's hot micing, BTW. So Waylon, does that answer your question, or it kind of confused you even more?
No, ma'am, that makes sense. Just a follow-on question with that, to not be so predictable and keep that, what was the word you used? That's why you don't want to have like the FTCP and the CTCP in the same spot, keeping that smaller footprint. Would you want to change the LRP per mission, or maybe even like per day?
It really depends on, it really, I hate to use this, it's really METTC dependent.
Yes, ma'am, that makes sense.
Yep, it really is. Because, you know, the battlefield, right, it changes to the minute, you know? So you don't want to be as, it has to be mutual between both parties. You don't want to change it at the last minute, but the other unit, the other element was tracking another place. It has to be mutual, but you can't. It's just a temporary point. That's it.
Got it. Thank you, ma'am.
and you said it perfectly. It really depends on, it's METC dependent. It's by the mission. Because you don't know if the enemy has an LPOP somewhere on a hill. Oops. Right? And they see an LRP. Oh, they did an LRP here. Are they going to try again? Right? You don't want to make it predictable for them. You know?
Yes, ma'am. Makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Good question. LPOP. Oops. I can't even write right now. Any other questions? This is good stuff right here. I know this looks like Russell Crowe, Beautiful Mind right here. Like it looks like what is this?
Hello, ma'am. Lieutenant Hernandez, may I ask a question?
Go ahead, Hernandez.
In reference to the base cluster security,
Mhm.
is that usually planned beforehand, or is that made up as the unit goes along?
Captain Lasky, if you want to answer that, if he's on. It's planned because for the base cluster defense, right? Because say like you have Delta in its own little area, right? Echo, Fox, Hotel in India, right? It has to be planned because those intersecting fires. Oh my God, I can't even speak right now. Fields of fire. Thank you. The fields of fire. We have to make sure that safety first, right? We don't want to have that incident where soldiers are flagging each other and cause an accident, right? Unfortunately, so it has to be planned. Because in overall, it builds that sector sketch, right? That range card.
Yes, ma'am. But like in a situation where like the maneuver element or unit like advances like pretty far too fast, would they still make it up as they go along, or again, just in reference, there's always like a plan in place in any given event?
Oh, good question. And that relies on that unit SOP because each unit has their own way of doing things. Like I can tell you right now, Fort Carson, Colorado has different SOPs from how would Fort Drum would do things, So it relies on that unit SOP, and that's how units are able to do that rehearsal. Like, hey, if the enemy breaks through our lines, right, and it's moving towards us, right? There's always rehearsals in place, and so that would be the unit SOP.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I hope that answers your question. Probably not.
It's pointing me in the right direction, ma'am. From what I got out of it, it's rehearsals and unit SOP.
Yes, because it would be planned, and it would have it. The rehearsals would help visualize what in the worst case scenarios, right? That's why we do all those, sergeant's time training, those battle drills, right? Because
Yes,
you don't want to go into it cold. Like it would be like is anyone a football fan? Steelers fan? Anyone a Steelers fan? Oh,
Not anymore.
No one is, ma'am.
No one is?
Not anymore, ma'am. Not after that game.
Yeah, it was so I'm Wiggins, you a Steelers fan?
I'm from Pittsburgh, but I don't support them, man.
Oh, you don't support them. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna use football, right? I love football. My team didn't make it, so. But anyways, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the Steelers. So, the Steelers, they, for the most part, I'm going to give them some credit, right? They're a good team, but this season, right? Their rehearsals, the regular season, right?
every time they play a game, they were always playing against the Jaguars and the Chicago Bears every week, right? That was the rehearsal game. That's why up until the point, they were 11-0, right? And so they didn't the games that they were playing did not test their limits, right? They didn't work hard throughout the entire season. So when they actually try to go into the playoffs, right? Actually try to fight against a real, contender, they can do it. And so how I relate to this is that you have to continue to train for the worst case scenario, right? Train as you fight. And so to go try to round out or trying to go back to the original question is that is really up to that unit to really figure out, hey, if they do this, how do we react to that, right? There's always a action, reaction and counteraction, right? What we do, what they're going to do, and how we're going to react to it. There's always going to be an action, reaction, counteraction. So it goes back down to that unit. How much are they going to do with those rehearsals on the worst case scenario? And I just wanted to talk crap about the Steelers because, I feel like this is a good opportunity. Does that make sense? It's rehearsals.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So any other questions, comments, concerns, clarification on the trains? This is not going to be the last time we're going to talk about this. You're going to see this when we go when we go into the classroom again. Okay. So I'm going to put you on a 5-minute break, and the other Captain Jarzen is going to go finish off the Sustainment Brigade, and you all are going to learn about the LOGSTAT. Okay? So we're going to come back at 15:10. Thank you, Aduro. It's yes, you're correct. Interlocking sectors of fire. Thank you.
Oh, hey everyone. While my husband is getting online, so once we finish class, I need the class leaders, both class leaders, both XOs, both S3s, and both academic officers to stand fast for a couple of admin notes, okay? Thank you.
Roger, man.
Okay, everybody. Sorry about that delay, and I appreciate everyone's patience. So, all right. So, before we get into LOGSTAT, there's just a couple things I want to close out with: sustainment brigades, division sustainment brigades, CSSBs, DSSBs, just to kind of close that out, and then field any last questions before moving on to LOGSTAT. Sound good?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Outstanding. Okay. So everybody can see my screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Captain Jarzen went through like really into the detail of all of the unit distribution, supply points, throughputs, and you remember one of the things that I left off on prior to sending you all the lunch was throughput, right? And so remember we talked about throughput being you're essentially bypassing an echelon, right, to go ahead and deliver supplies to that echelon down. So you can throughput from alpha company all the way to an LRP for the company trains. If you're in the CSSB or /DSSB, and if you're in a composite truck company or composite supply company, right, you can go ahead and bypass the BSA and deliver to an FTCP, right, for that FSC. Right. So to kind of put it into a little bit of perspective for you, we're going to go into some story time, right? So that JRTC rotation that Captain Jarzen talks so fondly of, I was there as well, commanding my own company. So we were there at the same time. She was obviously in the brigade combat team. I'm in the CSSB. So this is the perfect example of how things work, right? She's the FSC. I am the CSC. The only thing that was missing between us was the brigade support battalion. And Lord knows that BSA was missing in action the entire rotation, right? So let's put this in perspective, right? So remember, I told you one of the things that we would use throughput for is in the case of a logistical blackout, right? Everybody remember me saying that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. So that's when your BSB, they're packing up all their crap, they're loading it so that way they can jump to another location, right? So that way they can move closer to the maneuver, the supported maneuver battalions. At least that was their intent, right? So because they're so focused on themselves, right, they can't conduct sustainment operations. Well, here's the other thing, right? Brigade support battalions aren't the only entities that have to, we used to call them jumping. You would jump your BSA. Now it's called displacement, right? Almost like going into a pool, you're displacing the water around you. The same thing happens with sustainment. You're displacing your organization. So division support areas have to displace as well. They also have to pack up all their crap and jump. Right. So we found ourselves in a situation to where, hey, the BSA had moved
further than we were able to go ahead and reasonably support them. So we, as the DSA, were the ones going into the blackout. So before we moved, right, I put together a throughput package, right? And in my little throughput package, I had some class 1, right? I had some class 3. I had class 1 water. I had class 1, ice. So whoever's going to JRTC in August, ice is your friend. All right. So class 1, class 3, some water and ice, and we also threw in, I think, some class 4 as well, if I remember correctly. So this was the throughput package that we put together, and we told the BSA, hey, the DSA is displacing. We can't fully support you during this time. However, as part of our advon, we're sending this throughput package to the location of where we're going to set up shop, right? So this throughput package gets on ground. And once they're there and the advon begins to kind of establish the unit area of where the DSA is going to displace into, my platoon leader starts calling me on the JCR. Hey, sir, there's a huge issue right now. Okay, what is it, platoon leader? She's like, hey, all of these soldiers claiming to be from the engineer battalions and the FA battalion they just came out of the woods and they're asking for supplies. I was like, well, that's strange. What are they saying? Well, they're saying that they haven't had food for 2 days. They're black on water. They have no ice, and they have maybe a few hundred gallons of fuel left. And we're like, wow, how did it get to that point? Well, because these guys right here, that BSA, failed to support them. So that throughput package that we sent forward, right, was enough, literally, for that engineer FSC and the Fox FSC to go ahead and do a very emergency style resupply of the commodities that they needed. So before that DSA even got to where the advon was, that throughput package didn't even make it to an FSC. The FSCs came to us because they were black on everything because their BSB failed to support them. But by virtue of that throughput package existing, it was able to sustain those 2 FSCs long enough for them to go ahead and displace and get into a better position and then actually get their real resupply from the BSA, right? So another thing to think about, throughputs from a DSA to an FSC, right? So a lot of our focus is always on trucks, okay? There's another way that we can do resupplies. What does somebody think that is?
Aerial delivery, sir.
Bingo! Right? So here's your helicopter. It's like a OH-58, right? But pretend that that's a Black Hawk or a Chinook, right? So guess what I have over here in the DSA? I have the ability to sling load classes of supply, right? So here's a little sling, right? And they might have some water, they might have some fuel. If I have a fuel blivet, there might be some class 1, there might be some class 4, all right? But if there's a unit that's in desperate need and that trucks aren't going to get there fast enough, I could arrange to have an aerial resupply of throughput to an FSC, completely bypassing the BSA. Or I can have it delivered if there's a company that really needs it all the way here at the flot. I can have it dropped off at an LRP. So say this is Alpha Company in the armored in the Combined Arms Battalion, and that company really needs these supplies. I can have that thing dropped right at an LRP so Alpha Company can go get it. So by air, I can actually bypass more echelons. right? But the biggest thing to consider with something like a throughput going from a division support area to anywhere forward is depending on what needs to be throughput, you're going to be limited on what you can actually push forward. You can't push as much via air as you can on ground, right? Your limiting factor with air is the number of available aircraft, right? So I know that may sound a little bit confusing, right? But I want you to understand this concept of where things can originate in your division support areas from your sustainment brigades, from your DSSBs, from those composite truck companies, from those composite supply companies, and how they're actually going to get to that supported brigade. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Cool.
Sir, Lieutenant Muncie here. I did have a question about that aerial delivery. Is that considered, are those usually considered throughput method, or can they be kind of all echelons of?
It could be echelons, but because I have supplies that are originating at my location at the DSA, right? And I'm not sending it to the BSA. I'm not sending it even to the FTCP. I could send it wherever I want on the battlefield. But as long as I'm bypassing an echelon and I am resupplying something that is not my immediate receiver, like the BSB, that would technically be considered throughput. Because I'm throughputting supplies, I'm throughputting something to an echelon that needs it, and I've bypassed something else entirely.
Okay, understood, sir.
Yeah. So the aerial one, it's a little bit more of an advanced concept, right? But one of the principles of sustainment, right, is flexibility, right? You have to be flexible. Sustainment brigades are flexible organizations, right? They have the capability to do air. They have the capability to do ground. Some sustainment brigades have the capability to even do rail and sea, right? It really depends. And so understanding all those kind of tools in your toolkit is going to allow this momentum to continue going forward, right? Which is at the end of the day what we want to happen. All right. One last thing with sustainment brigades, and then I swear we're going to be donesies. All right. So some of you are like probably thinking, okay, hey, gee, sir, all that stuff is great, that division sustainment brigades and, armored brigade combat teams, but I'm going to combat aviation brigade. I'm going to like a fires brigade. I'm going to the 371st Sustainment Brigade, Jawbone Warriors, right? I'm going to these things. How does all of this stuff matter to me? Well, glad you asked, because I'm about to tell you, right? So here we have our division support area. Remember, here's our division sustainment brigade. Here's our division sustainment support battalion, right? Over here, remember we talked earlier, where's my Jawbone Warrior at? Lieutenant Frick?
What, sir?
Right, 371st is right here, right? Remember, they're not really task organized, right? Their mission really isn't to directly support, say, the 4th Infantry Division, right? Their mission is really area support. They're going to support whoever needs it, wherever, right? So let's look on the right side of my screen, that Division Sustainment Brigade, Division Sustainment Support Battalion, right? So these guys, gals, they're going to go provide support to this Brigade Support Battalion, right? Let's just call this, I think 64th BSB in 3rd Brigade 4ID, right? And this DSSB is also going to go support this Aviation Support Battalion, right, for the 4th ID Combat Aviation Brigade. So Combat Aviation Brigades also have their equivalent of a BSB. They just call them Aviation Support Battalions. And more or less, they're organized roughly the same way. They would still have to set up their own brigade support area, right? Their Alpha Company is still going to have to distribute to their FSCs, right? but say, hey, we're focused over on this one because this is where the fight's at. So we're focused on these brigade combat teams, and maybe that CSSB can't get to the aviation support brigade. Well, they're pretty close to actually to 371st, so 371st might be able to go sustain them as well, right? Because they're providing area support. Keep that in mind. They're providing area support. They're going to support anybody and everybody, right, who's in their area of operations. All right? But these Jawbone Warriors are pretty cool. So not only are they going to support, 4th Infantry Division Combat Aviation Brigade, and they're providing support to the Division Sustainment Brigade, but they have so many CSSBs task organized under them that, hey, you have a fires brigade here, right? Fires CSBs, more or less. So they're going to go and provide that same support to that brigade support battalion for a fires brigade. So if you're going to a fires brigade, guess what you have? You have a BSB and you also have FSCs, right? If you're going to something like, hey, sir, I'm going to what it's called DivArty. I don't know what that is. It's Division Artillery, right? That would be these guys right here. There you go. Division Artillery. Mostly, they're going to get their support from that DSB. But depending on where that DivArty's arrayed on the battlefield, that support could also come from that area support sustainment brigade, right? Because remember, this DSA, it's always moving forward. Not always. Most of the time, it's moving forward. Most of the time, that battlefield and that forward line of troops is moving further and further forward. And so not every unit is going to be displacing at once. That BSA might move first. That DSA might move second. Hey, this BSA for the cab might be moving last. So if they're moving last, well, hey, this DSSB is going to go focus all their efforts on these Armored Brigade Combat Team BSBs. Hey, 371st, I need you to go ahead and take care of the Aviation Support Battalion and the cab until we can get set back up and they displace closer to us so that way we can provide them support. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Cool.
Tracking, sir.
All right. So I know that's a lot. So does anybody have any more questions regarding sustainment brigades, CSSBs? I know it's a lot of information, right? And you may not fully understand it, but I'm definitely going to open to questions right now, or anything even Mrs. Captain Jarson spoke of. Okay, cool. And that's okay. You're going to have questions later on. You're like, what? I don't understand anything that was just talked about. Again, totally cool. You're learning a new language, right? All right. So now, everybody take a deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. We're going to talk about LOGSTATs, logistics status reports, and we're also going to go into some commodity calculations. All right. So I'm going to preface commodity calculations right now, right? So logisticians get a very bad rap for good reason, because we tend to look at commodities in terms of, I guess the easiest way that I could put it, in terms of their given units of measurement, right? How many cases of MREs do I have? How many gallons of water do I have? How many boxes of ammunition do I have? How many gallons of fuel do I have? Right? That is good for us in order to kind of figure out some math. There's always going to be math, right? And that's okay when you're doing those calculations to figure out how much you actually need, how much is going out, right? How much is being received, right? Logisticians, rightly so, get kicked in the face when we start spouting off to our supported maneuver commanders. Hey, sir, hey, ma'am, you have approximately 1,286.2 gallons of water. That means absolutely nothing to that commander. And they're probably just going to give you a butt stroke to the face just for saying that, right? It means nothing to them when you say, hey, sir, ma'am, we have 22 cases of MREs. We have 48,000 gallons of fuel. Like nobody, like they don't want to hear that, because you know why? Why do you think that they don't want to hear just those big, ridiculous numbers?
Sir,
Doesn't mean anything, sir.
Right, it doesn't mean anything, but why doesn't it mean anything to them?
Sir, this is Lieutenant Benson. Would it be because they don't really know specifically what their consumption rates are? So if we can translate it into how many days of supplies they have, maybe it'll mean more to them.
That is the greatest thing ever, right? That is honestly the answer, all right? Because if you go and you tell your maneuver commander, hey sir, hey ma'am, we have 6,828 gallons of fuel on hand. They're just going to look at you and be like, wow, that's a lot of fuel. Right? See you. Right? But you need to tell them what that means. Hey, sir. Hey, ma'am. We have approximately 1 day of supply of fuel on hand, which is going to enable you to get to objective so-and-so based off of the current level of fuel consumption. Or, hey, we only have enough fuel for really a half day of supply left of fuel. Sir, ma'am, your tanks aren't going to make it to objective so-and-so unless we need to do a hard stop hasty defense. So that way we can resupply your tanks. Oh, got you. Thank you, FSC commander. That makes total sense now. You've now spoken in the language that they understand. They understand days of supply. They understand kilometers. Hey, you can go this far with how much we have, right? That at the base of it is how we're able to look at commodity calculations, right? We still have to calculate that stuff for our own internal use as logisticians. So that way we have to use our mind brains to then turn that into what does that mean for a day of supply for this unit that I'm supporting, right? Because a day of supply for 166 armor in 3rd Brigade, 4th Infantry Division is going to look a lot different from 1 day of supply for 214 Infantry in 2nd Brigade, 10th Mountain, right? But you as a logistician are going to have to calculate that and then turn that into the language that your maneuver commanders understand, right? And the worst of all is when we're around other logisticians, like in a BSB or in a sustainment brigade, we forget that language still applies. If I stand there and I tell my sustainment brigade commander, hey, sir, hey, ma'am, we have 128,000 gallons of fuel stored. He or she's going to look at me like, wow, that's a lot of fuel. But I have to be able to tell that to him or her to say, hey, sir, ma'am, we have approximately, based off of the operational tempo of 3rd Brigade, 4th Infantry Division, we have about 2.5 days of supply on hand of Class 3. Oh, great. I should go tell that to the division commander so he can make a decision. Right? All right. So that horse has now been beaten to death. But I'm going to do it again. All right. Terminal learning objectives, whatever. ATPs, 4-90 says initial draft. You could look at 4-90, 4-93, FM 4-0, 4-93.1. The references that were in the Sustainment Brigade deck, you can look at those. there are certain examples of what a LOGSTAT would look like, right? And the best way to think of it is it's a way. And I'm going to go into a little bit more granularity, right, as to what will work and maybe things that won't necessarily work. All right, so when we talk about LOGSTATs, right, so the principles of it is really you think of a LOGSTAT as this is a snapshot in time of what my unit has on hand, right? It says includes on-hand stockage level and what is needed for the next 24, 48, 72 hours. That's a very how do I say it? That's like a very logistician way of looking at LOGSTATs, right? Good logisticians don't think like logisticians. Good logisticians think like maneuver. They think like combat arms, right? The very best thing that you can do is using that LOGSTAT. Hey, this is what my on-hand stockage level is, especially if you're down there at the FSC level, right? Because again, who are you supporting? If you're an FSC, who are you supporting? Don't everybody jump up at once.
The maneuver elements, the line units.
The line units, right? So let's put on our thinking caps for a second, right? Let's just say you are the FSC for 166 Armor, right? And you have Alpha Company, Bravo Company, Charlie Company, Delta Company, right? Do you think that Alpha Company commander, that armor officer, or anybody in that company is going to know what they need for the next 24, 48, 72 hours?
I want to say no, sir. I think that'd be up to the logistician to plan that out and allocate the supplies. Is that correct?
That is the coolest thing I've heard, right? And I'm not anywhere saying that our combat arms brothers and sisters are dumb. They just have a different mission than we do, right? They're trained to think about something else. We're trained to think about everything, right? We have to do the thinking for them. We have to be able to know that they need water before they run out of water, right? They're not going to realize that they're out of water until they pull out their canteen and it's empty. They're not going to realize it until then, right? So at that company level, right, the biggest thing with a LOGSTAT is, hey, it should include, just tell me what you have on hand. Hey, I'm the loggy. I'll figure out what you need for the next 24, 48, 72 hours. Just tell me what you have on hand. Let me do the math. Okay, great. Thanks, homie. Right? And then your LOGSTAT as a logistician is going to include that next 24, 48, 72 hours. Right? So you're going to include, hey, here's what's on hand for the whole battalion. And then, hey, here's what the whole battalion's going to need for the next 24, 48, 72. You as the logistician figures that out. Maybe not you as the platoon leader, right? But maybe you as an XO, maybe you as a battalion S4, right? Maybe you as an FSC commander, you figure that out, right? All right, and the biggest thing, it has to be simple, right? You don't want to make it so complicated and have so much, you don't want to do it so that you're trying to outthink somebody who's receiving it, because all you're going to do is end up confusing not just them, but you're going to confuse the people who actually have to report this stuff to you, right? So it has to be simple, but has enough useful detail so that way everybody's on the same page, right? So when we actually look at an example LOGSTAT, we'll just use MREs for example. Like, hey, we're going to count, when we talk about MREs, we're going to talk about it in the units of cases. In one case of MREs, there are 12. There are 12 individual MREs, right? But I don't want entire maneuver battalions to count every single individual MRE they have. Just tell me the number of cases that you have. I'll figure out the rest, right? So that way they can just report cases to you. You can then report cases, and then you send that report back to the BSB, or the BSB sends that to their brigade, and that brigade sends that to the division, who sends that to the sustainment brigade. Everybody can now speak the same language. Everybody understands when we're talking about MREs and on-hand stockage, we're talking about cases, right? The biggest thing is those log stats are going to have to shape decisions on the battlefield, right? I say this, and you probably heard Captain Jarzen say this already. If not Captain Jarzen, you probably heard Captain Stuhlmiller or Captain Lasky say it. Intelligence drives operations. Operations drives sustainment, right? So just think about that for a second, right? Pretend you're a military intelligence officer. The intelligence that you have about what the enemy is doing or where they're located is going to determine to that maneuver commander in that brigade combat team or the division commander what he or she is going to be able to do, to how they're going to attack or how they're going to defend, right? Intelligence has made has driving what operations are going to do. That operations now, right? Say I'm a brigade combat team commander. Wow, the enemy is like they're dug in or they're doing X, Y, and Z. This is my opportunity to counterattack. I want to do all this cool shit, right? I just say I want this thing done. My operations, my S3 plans everything out. How we're going to just annihilate the enemy. Logisticians should take that operation and then they figure out, here's how I support this. Right? Those log stats are going to be very important to help shape and drive those decisions. Because, hey, maybe you have, like in those log stats, it reveals you only have enough fuel to maybe support one axis of advance instead of two. You could still support an axis of advance for one unit, maybe a couple units, but you can't do it for the whole brigade. And then you as a logistician have to go forward and say, hey, sir, ma'am, we can do this based off of what we have. Or we can do all of this that you want, but here's the trade-off. We can't go as far because we have to spread the wealth to everybody. Right? So those log stats are important because it's going to allow people to make decisions. Right? But the decisions themselves should never be hampered by logistics and sustainment. Because if they are, we as logisticians have failed. All right, so brigades typically establish the LOGSTAT reporting procedures in an SOP. The format times, whether it's analog, digital, system reporting, that's all good and well, right? I can tell you this now, every brigade combat team has an SOP for how they're supposed to do LOGSTATs. And then the moment that brigade combat team goes to the field, everybody just takes that SOP, they throw it in a trash can, and then they light it on fire, and then they just go do what they want. Because everybody ends up reinventing these things all over again. They reinvent them because whatever is in that SOP was never trained, and it's not effective. It's not easy to use. It's not easily understandable, right? So that log stat, if you're going to a BSB and you work in a SPO, right, one of the first things you should be looking at is how are we reporting log stats? How is my SPO in the BSB receiving LOGSTAT reports from the Brigade S4? From the maneuver battalions? What method are we receiving this stuff? And then how are we able to translate this stuff, give them what they need, and then tell the sustainment brigade what we need? Right? So it's very important, right? These log stats, right? Because you got to think, how many battalions are there in a brigade combat team? Right? You have your engineer battalion, your fires battalion, your cav squadron, your 3 maneuver battalions. Oh, congratulations, there's also the BSB. So you have 7 battalions. And think of how many companies are in a brigade combat team. Ballpark at around 32. Could you imagine 32 individual unique log stats amongst 7 individual unique battalion log stats? Like, it makes me want to jump off a bridge thinking about that, right? And you could see how very convoluted it would get. And it's why bad log stats lead to Fox FSC and Echo FSC not receiving their supplies from the BSB at JRTC, so they have to crawl out the woodwork like The Walking Dead, and then go and just like tear apart my throughput package because they didn't report what they actually needed, what they actually had on hand, what they projected that they were going to need, right? And then lastly, hey, it's got to be timely, it's got to be accurate. Most units are going to say, hey, send it up twice a day, once in the morning, and then like once in the evening in 12-hour intervals, right? The evening one, depending on the scope of operations, the evening one and the morning one aren't going to change too much from evening to morning, right? But that's neither here nor there. Don't worry about it. Any questions so far before we move on? Any comments, concerns? Like, bro, I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, cool. Fear not. All right, so log stats. So here's an example, right? This slide, I'm not a fan of this log stat, right? To me, this is like the Anatoly Dyatlov of log stats. It's like, it's not great and it's not terrible. And if you get that reference, like, bonus points to you, and you get an extra A at the end of Bullock. So the biggest thing that you can see, right, is they have this broken down, right? Everybody can think of a 9-line medevac form, right? Has anybody ever called in a 9-line in training? ROTC, West Point, OCS?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Cool. So we try to structure log stats roughly the same way, right? Again, this isn't great, and it's also not terrible. It gets the job done for what you need, right? So if you're calling up this thing like, hey, I am Golf FSC. Here's my grid location, right? Here's my head count. We have 400 packs in the battalion. All that goodness, right? So here you see the way they have this structured is MREs each. So am I telling now, that unit, that Alpha Company commander in 166 Armor, hey, go ahead and count every single individual MRE that you have? You could, and they're just going to punch you in the face and then ignore you, because that's now too complicated. Remember I talked about, hey, try to make this simple to where they're going to understand these things, right? This log stat is built for a logistician. This log stat is not built for a maneuver commander, right? And that's kind of the weakness of this example, right? Because we're talking about MREs, UGRs. Maneuver commanders don't know what UGRs are. They don't care. They just get food, they eat it, right? Water, bulk and gallons, like they don't know. Bottled water, ignore that because we don't do that, quote unquote, anymore. Ice, again, don't know. Class 2, Class 3, Class 3 packaged, Class 4, Class 5, Class 6, so on, all the classes of supply. So what I want you to do right now, right, is let's go to the land of imagination. I want you to pretend that this whole side doesn't exist, right? And let's just say that. Let's call this cases, right? Water, right? You can put, gallons per person, or probably something simpler of, hey, I know my battalion standard is every single soldier is going to have 2 canteens and a full camelback on each person. That equates to this much water. Okay, so what does that look like? Bottle, don't worry about it. Ice, pounds, yeah. Hey, how many bags of ice do we have left? Right? Fuel. What's the fuel gauge look like? Packaged, again, maneuver commanders aren't concerned with packaged. They don't deal with that. Class 4, yeah, they're concerned about this. This makes sense to them. Class 5, hey, that makes sense to maneuver commander. So when we take away this whole next 24, 48, 72, all this other junk, hey, I know a combat load for an individual soldier is 3 MREs. That's the combat load for one soldier. I know the combat load for one soldier is, say, 2 gallons based off of the canteens and the camelback. Right? So this combat load here, that becomes essentially your baseline. This is what it's going to take to get Private Jarzyn back to green. But hey, right now, Private Jarzyn has 1 MRE. Oops. Private Jarzyn has 1 canteen left. Right? Hey, Private Jarzyn is like red right now. He doesn't have enough stuff left. Hey, his full combat load is like 240 rounds of 5.56. I'm not going to have Private Jarzyn sit there and then pull out all of his magazines and then count every single round. Hey, I have like 2 magazines left, man. Right? You need to put it in ways that, and change this LOGSTAT in ways such that what you're receiving, everything speaks that same language. Right? So that quantity on hand is going to be the difference between what's been consumed and then what's it going to take for Private Jarzyn to get back to green. Right? How many more magazines do I have to resupply Private Jarzyn so he has enough ammunition, enough water, and enough food? Right? Then you as logisticians, now it's your job. You get to figure out. You get to go sit there and do the math and figure out, okay, here's what Alpha companies consumed over the last 24 hours. Here's what they currently on hand. So to get them back to green, here's how much they're going to need in the next 24 hours. So to kind of put this, I'll try to simplify this a little bit. Let's just say a combat load is, I'm going to put 12C for 12 cases, right? They have 4 cases. Hey, in the next 24 hours, right, they're going to consume that other 4 cases. So they're going to need 12 cases. This is just numbers. Don't worry about where I'm coming out. I'm making up these numbers. So if I know that they're going to consume 12 cases of MREs every 24 hours, there you go. Next 72 hours, I need 12 cases. Next 48 hours, I need 12 cases. Right? So that math that you get to do as a logistician, that's going to help inform you as to what is going to be required. Don't ever expect that maneuver unit that you're supporting to tell you, and this is kind of an exclusive like FSC look, but don't expect those maneuver companies to ever tell you what you think that they need, what they think they need for the next 72 hours. They're too busy like blasting the enemy or getting blasted by the enemy, right? They're like fighting for their lives and they don't have to think about, well, gee, I wonder how many gallons of water I need. Like that's your job to figure out, logistician, right? And so this report, right? You'll have class 5, class 6, class 7. will also be on there. Remember, somebody asked a question to Captain Jarson earlier, like, hey, what do we mean by class 7? That's like your major end item. That's your truck. That's a tank. That's a, that's a javelin, right? That's a generator. Hey, maybe an RPG came in and blew up your generator. And then now you don't have as much power. So you put on for class 7 on line 7, hey, I need a new 10K generator. Right? To kind of get you back up to your combat load, so to speak. Class 8 will be reported on the LOGSTAT. Now remember, I told you, Captain Lasky told you, a lot of people told you, you're not really going to be touching class 8. That is both true and false. And what I mean by that is that class 8 is going to be reported up, right? Because you got to think, right? Soldiers have their IFAKs, individual first aid kit. They're going to have that. They're going to be using it. Hey, I've used, Private Jarson has used like 2 tourniquets because he had to slap tourniquets on 2 of his friends who got shot. So now he has no more tourniquets. Hey, he's had to use this. He's had to use these things from his IFAK. He no longer has them. Okay, great. Now I know I need to resupply that stuff in the IFAK. So whatever that's going to look like for a combat load, and you can just simplify it like, hey, I just need a full IFAK resupply. And you can just use it as the combat load as 1 IFAK. That's class 8. Right? Class 9, again, that's like repair parts. Right? Your trigger puller, your infantry, your armor, your FA, they're not going to know what repair parts they need unless they're like super smart, and they do because they care about their stuff. Yeah, then they're going to know. But again, those mechanics are going to tell you, hey, here's the repair parts that we're going to need for class 9. Right? Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns about this LOGSTAT format? Like I said, it's not great, it's not terrible, but this LOGSTAT format is clearly built for a logistician, not a maneuver person.
Sir,
Excuse me, sir.
how often do we do a log pack to fulfill their demand, and how often do we just bring everything out there and let them, like, do we ever bring everything and let them take what they need? Does that make sense?
No. No. Because here's the thing. How can I put this? Right? How can I put this? So if you just say bring out the supplies, right, and then you call those maneuver companies and say, hey team, come over here to this grid point. I've set up the buffet for you, right? And you could have Alpha Company, who's the main effort, and Bravo Company and Charlie Company all going in and competing for the same resources. Charlie Company could just be sitting fat and happy. They don't need any more, but they're going to take what they need because they think they might need it, which means it's going to be less for Alpha Company, who's the main effort. Remember, Captain Jarson spoke to you about priorities of supply, main efforts, supporting efforts. Who is the priority of supply? Who is the priority for resupply? So you're not going to bring it out there and just kind of present it to everybody as a buffet, right? Those things are going to be scheduled like, hey, Alpha Company, you're the main effort. I know you're stopping at this point. I'm going to resupply you. I'm going to get you to green. Hey, Bravo Company, I know you're not green right now, but you're at amber. You're about to be red. I can give you just enough stuff to get you back to amber. Hey, Charlie Company, hey, you're the battalion's reserve right now. You're green. I'm going to top you off maybe, depending on what I have left. But right now you're green. I don't need to touch you. Right? The biggest problem that logisticians have when they're dealing with maneuver, when they're dealing with combat arms, is we try to be all things to all people. Right? We try to be like Oprah Winfrey to our maneuver battalion. You get full resupply, you get full resupply, and you get full resupply. Everybody gets full resupply. And then guess what? Nobody gets full resupply, and everybody's just left screaming at you. Right? Certain companies, certain battalions are going to have to learn to live in amber. Right? And us as logisticians, at all levels, we do a very bad job of managing those expectations, right? We do a bad job at it. So we just can't resupply everybody or just put everything out there and say, hey guys, go for it, right? Because then we're only hurting ourselves and we're only hurting the mission. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sure. Somebody else had something.
Sir, Lieutenant Beavis, question. As a logistician, how do we know how much quantity is on hand? Do the maneuver commander?
Sorry, you were cutting out, Lieutenant Bevis.
Sorry, sir. I'm curious, as a logistician, how do we know how much quantity is on hand? Is that something that the maneuver commanders report to us?
Bingo. Like those maneuver commanders, those maneuver XOs, those maneuver first sergeants. Remember, Captain Jarzin, when she was going over unit distribution, company trains, all that stuff, those company first sergeants are the ones who are diddy bopping back in their company trains with their company supply sergeants to go pick up their supplies. So it's not necessarily the maneuver commander, but somebody from that maneuver company is telling you in the FSC, here's what we have on hand. It's not your job to really second guess them. Like, I don't think so, bro. You look like you have, 2 pallets of MREs. Not one. They're just going to tell you what they have on hand, and then you have to go. You have to make your calculations. And then you're in the BSB, and you're receiving this from battalions now. Those battalion S4s and those battalion FSCs are reporting back to you, hey, here's what we have on hand in the battalion. So that reporting is bottom up. You're going to know what somebody has on hand based off of what they report. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else?
Sir, Second Lieutenant Butts, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
All right. I just wanted to ask, you said if they might not know what's on their vehicles, that maybe like the parts they need. So how would you find out that information? I might have missed it. I don't know.
So that's going to come from those mechanics. That's going to come from those field maintenance teams. That's going to come from that maintenance support team. That's going to be coming from the maintenance platoon in the FSC. Right? Because hey, if say like a Humvee goes down, right? Out there on the battlefield, Humvee goes down, it breaks down because they need wheels, right? 2 of their wheels got blown out, and they need 2 wheels, right? So it's pretty obvious, but those mechanics who are going to be the ones to look at it and diagnose it, like, yep, hey, classic problem, wheels were shot out. Those mechanics are going to be the ones that kind of fill in that information for Class 9. Because remember, those mechanics, those field maintenance teams are attached as far forward to those maneuver companies as possible to be able to provide that rapid fix and get it back out there. If they can't fix it, they have to send it back further. But they're going to tell you, hey, here's the repair parts that we think it needs. Make sense?
Yes, sir. So they'd actually be able to, they would just be handing that information off, or would the LOGSTAT, would they enter that information in themselves, or how would that work?
It is dependent on whatever your unit SOP is. I'm not saying there is a way or the way, but there are. That is to say, I'm not saying there is the way, but there are a ways of how that is going to get reported.
Cool, sir. Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else? All right, stay with me, team. We're almost done. All right, so log stats. So here is a number of ways to essentially report log stats. JCR log, think of it like a computer, basically. It's like a very bad Army laptop with like graphics from 1998, right? So the year some of you were born, right? So that is essentially the method, your JCR or your JCR log, or now it's called the JBCP. Those systems are interactive, they're digital, they operate mostly off of satellite and GPS. You can do instant messaging through there. That's that's a very effective way to where you can build out a LOGSTAT report and you can just send it digitally to each other. But really, the biggest thing is LOGSTATs ultimately should first and foremost be capable of being transmitted through FM radio. If your LOGSTAT is so complicated like this, to where you're trying to transmit all of this through FM radio, and you're an alpha company in 166 Armor, it's gonna be a bad day for you, right? It has to be simple enough to where it can be transmitted through FM radio, and you could use that same format sending it through JCR. There's these other things in here: G-Army, CPOF, D6A, the MC4. It's just there. You're not really going to touch it, so don't worry. But the JCR log or the JCR is going to kind of be the biggest battlefield multiplier for you in order to get information out and to receive information. Okay, so it's a very terrible graphic, but here's essentially a way of how all of this would end up getting reported, right? So you have your Brigade Support Battalion, you have your, Brigade Support Battalion S4, Force Support Companies, Alpha Bravo Charlie. Here's your maneuver, right? Here's all your maneuvers. It's missing a whole lot of stuff, right? Again, bad graphics. It's okay. All right, so the way this would work, right, is that battalion, that maneuver battalion S4, right, they're the ones primarily receiving that LOGSTAT information, that on-hand quantity. All right, so let's just make this simple. They're receiving the on-hand quantity from those maneuver companies. Make sense? That battalion S4 in that maneuver battalion is going to work in conjunction with the FSC commander, right, to determine what is needed for the next 24, 48, 72 hours, right? Really, at the maneuver battalion level and that battalion FSC level, you're mostly concerned about, hey, where am I going to lay my head? What am I going to eat for the next 24 hours? Right? Because I want to say to you, this has probably been told to you, but just in case, I'm going to reiterate. A brigade combat team by itself can self-support. How many days can a brigade combat team self-support? Anybody? Like without receiving any resupply, how long could they self-support?
3, sir.
Bingo. 3 days. Right? Day 1 is with the soldier. That soldier has their own day of supply. Who has day 2? Who has the second day of supply for that soldier?
The company, sir?
Which company?
The maneuver company.
No.
So the forward support company, sir.
Bingo. Right, that forward support company is supplied for the next 24 hours. So they maintain that second day of supply. Who has the third day of supply?
The BSB, sir?
Man, that is the smartest thing I've heard. The BSB maintains the third day of supply for the entire brigade combat team. So that way that brigade combat team can self-support by itself without receiving resupply for 3 days. Right? So keep that in mind. That's why we'd say, hey, they need to go out to 72 hours. So that LOGSTAT that you see here, required for next 72, that's really for the BSB. Right? Here's what's required, right? Next 24, 48, that's what the FSC needs to know. That's what the FSC and that S4 needs to figure out. So the reason I say that they work together to figure this out is if you look at an MTO and pick any random armor battalion, field artillery battalion, infantry battalion, and if you look at the S4 section, right, the position of the S4, the officer, is not a logistician. They're not 90 alphas. If you're in an armor battalion, the S4 position is coded for a 19 alpha. If you're an infantry battalion, that position as the S4 is coded for an 11 alpha. An infantry officer. The same thing with field artillery. The same thing with aviation. Same thing with engineers. It's coded for that unit, which is kind of dumb in my opinion, because most of the time, all of this complex logistics stuff, because again, that S4, right, they're overseeing the internal logistics, the internal support of their maneuver battalion, right? But they speak combat arms. They don't speak logistics very well. And all you're going to get anytime you talk to a maneuver battalion S4 is they're just going to start spitting in your face saying throughput every 5 seconds. Because again, they don't know what these words mean. So that FSC commander, more often than not, is pulling the weight from the S4 to say, hey, I need to help figure this out. Good S4s who are maneuver will learn how to speak that language. That way they can better support maneuver, right? Rarely are you going to get a logistics officer to go be the S4 maneuver battalion. And when you do, that is an honor, because that means that maneuver battalion commander trusts a logistician to be the S4. Right? So these two are working in tandem. So where is this information now being sent? Right? It's being sent high and it's being sent low. Right? Or that is to say laterally. So that S4 with the FSC commander, they're sending that LOGSTAT report up to the brigade S4. Right? The brigade S4, just like a battalion S4, oversees all of the internal support for the brigade, which is really, they're just tracking who has what on hand, right? This is what's on hand, and then here's what you're going to need for the next 24, 72 hours. That S4, along with the FSC, is going to send that same information on hand, next 24 to 72. They're going to send that, see, just like that. They're going to send that to the BSB, specifically the BSB SPO, your support operations officer, right? That's a major. That person, right, who's this person. So if you hear brigade SPO and you hear battalion SPO, they're the same thing, right? They're just kind of used interchangeably. Right, because that SPO who works in the BSB is essentially the support operations officer for the brigade. But they're positioned within the BSB because that is where that jawbone of support comes from to support the rest of the brigade combat team. Right? That BSB S4, they're not a SPO. Right? They don't have anything to do with these folks. BSB S4s have nothing to do coordinating anything with maneuver battalions or supported battalions. Because again, those BSB S4s, all they care about are the internal companies. Right? Because it's the SPO, for better or worse, who has to take all of this information. And again, it's not even the brigade S4. The brigade S4 isn't going to go tell the BSB, oh hey, 64th BSB, you have to go resupply 166 armor. They're not going to tell them that. They're just going to say, hey, here's what 166 armor has on hand, and here's what they're going to need over the next 72 Here's what they're gonna need for the next 72 hours. Okay, great. Thanks, Brigade 4. Right? Because they're rolling all that information up for the brigade. And then they send that up to the division. Right? Again, it's that SPO who's going to take all of this information. And then they're going to determine, right? Hey, here's 166. And then here's 168. That SPO is going to say, hey, I have all this information. 168 is green based off of what they've reported, and their normal resupply is going to keep them green over the next 24, 48 hours. 166 is red right now, and over the next 72 hours, I'm going to be able to make them green. Right? It's that SPO who's going to begin making those determinations. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Makes about as much sense right now as anything else will. Like I said, it's as clear as mud. And you're only gonna know it and start to understand it once you're actually there. It's okay. So simultaneously, that SPO and that Brigade S4, they're also reporting the stuff up the division. Right? Because guess what? Remember, that BSB has the third day of supply. Well, who has days 4 through 6? That Division Sustainment Brigade has all those. So that BSB SPO sends all that up to the division. The division is going to consolidate that for all the brigade combat teams and then send that down to the Division Sustainment Brigade. First Brigade is here, Second Brigade is here, Third Brigade is here. Hey, First Brigade is green, Second Brigade is amber, Third Brigade, who's the main effort, is red. Okay, great. I need to get Third Brigade back to green as a Division Sustainment Brigade. So you see how that kind of ties back together. All right, so what does a LOGSTAT do for commanders? It helps them make decisions for the future. Specifically, sustainment commanders, support commanders, LOGSTATs inform maneuver commanders of what they're able to do, right? But this is kind of your check on learning, testable kind of thing. LOGSTATs are going to be timely and accurate. What analog system, digital system can platoon leaders most likely use to send up LOGSTATs? Your analog is your radio, digital is JCR. Are there any questions on LOGSTATs before we move into commodity calculations? And I swear, team, we're almost done. Okay, cool. All right, so class 1 calculations, right? It's pretty simple. And we're talking some basic math here. The most advanced thing that you're going to do is multiplication, maybe some division, right? So for all of you liberal arts majors with philosophy and history degrees, you're okay because you can do this. I did it, you can do it. All right, so we're talking class 1, right? So in one case of MREs, right, there's 12 individually wrapped MREs, right? So for one soldier, how many days of supply is that? So one soldier gets 3 MREs per day.
4 days.
Right, so one case is 4 days of supply for one soldier, right? So how many days of supply is that for 3 soldiers?
One and a third, sir.
Yeah, about 1 1/3. right? Remember, we're simple folk in the Army, so we'll round down. We'll just say 1 day of supply. What about for 4 soldiers? How many days of supply?
1, sir.
Outstanding. What about for 6 soldiers?
It's not enough, sir.
Bingo. Not enough. All right. All right. So everybody knows what a wood pallet is, right?
Yes, sir.
Outstanding. I ask because, believe it or not, there are some who don't. And it's okay. Right? Some of you are probably using it for a coffee table right now and think it's chic. Right? So your pallets, right? You can stack 48 cases of MREs on one pallet. Okay? How many MREs now is on, how many individually wrapped MREs is on that pallet?
576, sir.
Outstanding. Look at all you math wizards. So let's just say, for simple round numbers, for 200 soldiers, how many DOS? How many days of supply with one pallet of MREs?
Just under.
Was
It's
that
under a day, sir.
just under a day, right?
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right. So for everybody else in the audience who's too scared of math, don't worry. I'm going to help you out. So how are we finding out this number? Right? So again, 12 MREs per case, 48 per pallet, right? So let's times these two together, and then we get 576 MREs. Yay! So 576 MREs. Remember, one soldier, 1 day of supply for one soldier is 3 MREs. All right? So 3 MREs times 200 soldiers is 600 MREs. Right? So you're about 30 short. So really, one pallet for 200 soldiers is roughly 1 day of supply. Yes, it is a little less, but again, we're simple folk in the Army, and we're going to keep it very nice and easy. So we're just going to say this is a day of supply. All right, so for 450 soldiers, how many pallets of MREs would we need? Somebody I haven't heard from yet. I want us to calculate how many pallets of MREs we're going to need to support a 450 soldier battalion for 1 day.
About 2.5 pallets, sir.
2.5 pallets. All right. So let's walk through, whoever just said that. Let's walk through. You're going to tell me how you did the math.
Yes, sir. 450 soldiers times 3 for the number of MREs for a day.
And that comes to what?
Then that comes to 1,350.
Okay.
Divide that by the number of MREs per case, and then divide that by the cases of MREs per pallet.
So what did you get when you divided 1,350 into 12?
112.5 cases. So.
Right, and then you divide it again by 48?
Yes, sir.
Which gets you what, 2.5?
2.34.
Yeah, 2.34. So we round up. And then because, again, we're simple folk in the Army, right? Nobody's going to send a half pallet of anything. We'll just round it up. Hey, we're going to give you 3 pallets of MREs. Somebody gets to eat extra.
Sir, couldn't you also just take that 1,350 and divide it by the 576 and you get the same number? Like, it's just simple. Yeah, like if you just take the 1,350 and you divide it by 756, which is the amount of MREs on a pallet, then you're also going to get the 2.34.
Yeah.
It's just a little less steps.
Yeah, less steps, but generally, if for most folks, if you end up getting confused, like maybe you don't have this information, but at the very least, because again, we're human beings, we operate off of small, simple numbers. At least I know I do. It's easier for me to remember there are 12 MREs per case and 48 cases per pallet than there is for me to remember that there's just 576 MREs per pallet.
Right. This is also true.
Yeah. So I'm not saying what you said is incorrect. You're 100% right. Right. And it's going to depend on what your flavor of mathematics is. But for like your infantrymen, they're going to understand this a little bit better. Right. For most, even logisticians, they're going to understand this a little bit better. So I'm not going to dissuade you from calculating that. You can do it how you just described. Always just check your work. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Outstanding. Does anybody have any questions on how we calculated MREs?
I have a question about those pallets, sir.
Sure, man.
Is it always 48 cases per pallet? Like, is there a situation where accidentally there wasn't 48, or there were more than 48?
So when you are stacking MREs, right, cases of MREs, so this number comes from actual precise calculations of cubic weight, right? And it comes from very precise calculations of the cube that now takes up on a crop or a flat rack for a PLS to transport, right? So and you can double stack these things. So could you foreseeably run into a situation to where, hey, maybe you have 46 cases of MREs or 49? Well, that 49th case has to go somewhere in order for everything to fit together like Tetris. Oftentimes, it's not going to be that way because these pallets are already arriving, most likely to the division support area, right? They're already arriving packaged up. So you're not really breaking down cases of everything and then repalletizing it. You're just saying, hey, I know that 64th BSB needs 28 pallets if I'm in the sustainment brigade. So I'm just going to put these 28 pallets and just send them to 64th BSB. I don't have to re-break things down. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Cool. Anything else? Okay. All right. So there's this thing down here called the unitized group rations. The math is a little bit more complicated. Again, it's nothing. It's not calculus. Okay. It is none of that. It's about the same as calculating MREs. The most important thing, again, is just calculating it correctly. Right. One soldier. So servings per module, there's 50. Right. So if you have 50 soldiers and you have one module which serves 50, it's a 1-for-1. If you have 100 soldiers, now you need 2 modules. Does that make sense? If you have some crazy number like 426, you're just going to round up. So whatever number of modules that ends up being. I can't do math that quickly in my head. Again, I had a history degree. Does that make sense? Don't spend too much time on here, right? Know it, right? It's going to be helpful to know, but really what everybody's going to care about is your MREs. All right, class 1 calculations, we kind of did this already. And then here's a shorthand on how to do it. So exactly how we went over, this is what the slide is going to tell you for MREs and for the UGRs. Personal head count times the number of meals per day times the number of days. Okay, that's the total number of servings. Personal count times the number of meals per day times the number of days. Okay, that's how many MREs. All right, so we did this, right? And we can get fun and say, hey, everybody knows what a ration cycle is, right? Probably
Yes,
not.
sir.
No, sir.
Negative, sir.
Okay, so a ration cycle is saying, so you're going to hear some goofy stuff like, oh, hey, rations are Mike. All that means is, congratulations, you are now eating MREs 3 times a day, and they better be chili mac, right? That's all that means. That just means that that is the type of food that you're going to be eating. Now, you could get something like, hey, we're going to do Mike Alpha Mike. That alpha generally means your UGR, your UGRA, right? That's like, think of it like if you've ever been out to the field and you went to like a field feeding tent, that's the kind of food you're being served. That's a UGRA. So it's like, hey, you're going to have a MRE for breakfast, you have an MRE for dinner. But guess what? You guys are so special that we're going to treat you to a hot lunch. Cha-ching. Right? Everybody's happy. Right? That's all that means. So anytime a ration cycle is spelled out to you, and mostly that ration cycle is going to be determined by a couple things. One, it's going to be determined by the operational tempo, right? Because if you're in the offense, right, you're not stopping to cook everybody, you know, eggs and bacon, and you're not stopping to cook everybody, you know, chicken, and then you're not stopping to cook everybody, you know, steak. That is silly, right? In the offense, they're going to be lucky to get a hot A, right? Hey, in the defense, things have calmed down a little bit, right? But we have enough time to maybe cook you one hot meal, right? So we're gonna cook you a hot A for lunch, right? And so that is obviously going to, if that ration cycle is going to occur, then who determines it? It's mostly going to be your battalion sergeants majors. They're going to be the ones to kind of calculate what they want to serve to those soldiers, right? So if you ask Captain Jarzin, her command sergeant major, Sergeant Major Pena, amazing dude. He looked at her and said, guess what, ma'am? We're going to have a hot lunch. I want a hot lunch. And guess what Captain Jarzin said? She looks right at him and says, absolutely, Sergeant Major. So that changed her arithmetic of how she was going to report Class 1. Right? And that's just information, right? The most important thing, again, just know how to calculate MREs. And then once you get out into the real world, you're definitely going to have to understand how to calculate these things. Okay? We good? We happy?
Yes, sir.
Outstanding. All right. Almost done. Class 1 calculations for bulk. All right. This is water. I'm not going to spend too much time on here because you're going to have an entire separate calculation block of instruction for fuel and water. All right. This is the water planning guide. You can Google it. You can kind of get ahead of it. And the water consumption is based off of how the Army's determined climates: tropical, arid, temperate, cold. Right. It's also based off of the type of environment, operating environment that we're in. Right. So again, we're in large-scale ground combat operations, decisive action. There's a risk of chemical and biological, radiological threats. We're going to have to consume a lot more water. right? So the simplest way, just like, you know, all these numbers are very precise, right? But let's just say every soldier, and this is extreme, actually, so let's just say, hey, you figured out universal unit level consumption. We're just gonna say this is our base level of consumption, 7.27 gallons per day, right? So Private Jarzen, to exist, right, in large-scale ground combat operations requires 7.27 gallons per day. That's a lot of water. That's for me to drink. That is for me to bathe. That's for hygiene. That's for you name it, but mostly for consumption, right? That is how much I'm going to need per day, right? So FM4-10, sorry for the gendered language, but it's gallons per person per day, right? So if you have 100 soldiers and they require 7.27 gallons per day, how many gallons of water is that? Somebody tell me.
727, sir.
That is so cool. 727 gallons of water per day to sustain 100 soldiers, right? Now let's say you have 2 water buffaloes, which if you don't know, you'll know. You'll get a whole block of instruction, but we'll keep this simple. 1 water buffalo is equal to 400 gallons. So how many water buffaloes would you need to support 100 soldiers with water?
At
2.
least 2.
Say it again.
At least 2, sir.
At least 2. Thank you. Because if somebody came and said, well, you need precisely 1.34 water buffaloes, I'm probably going to reach through the screen and put hands on you myself. Right? Again, we're simple folk. We round up. You just need 2. And again, you're going to get a whole block of instruction on bulk water calculations later. So I'm not too in depth, but just know gallons per person per day. And there it is. You can look at this slide. This will tell you. Again, we don't really care about bottles of water. That's a very Afghanistan, Iraq type of a thing. So don't concern yourselves too much. It's good to know, but really, this is what you need to know. All right.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Sutherland. Are there any circumstances where you wouldn't just round up to the next highest? So like for the MREs, we calculated 2.5, we rounded up to 3 pallets. For the water buffaloes, we said at least 2.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any times where you'd actually really be specific when it comes to the calculations?
The only time I would be as specific is with class 5. Your ammunition.
Gotcha.
Right. And again, your ammunition is coming in crates, it's coming in boxes, it's going to come in all manner of configurations. That's probably the only time you'd want to be precise. But if I'm a field artilleryman, I'm never going to say no to extra 155 rounds. Right? But there are some things you're going to have to be a little bit precise on. Class 5 would probably, in my opinion, the thing that you'd have to be the most precise.
Okay, so as a general rule of thumb, sir, just round up to the next highest, unless it's class 5.
Yeah. Class 5, you may want to be a little bit more precise, and it's going to part of it is going to depend on what the configured load is that you're going to receive for class 5, and you'll learn all about configured loads and everything when you get to that block of instruction. Does that make sense? So one last thing with bulk water, and it's on this slide, right? So it has this example: 250 personnel need 7.1 gallons per day. For 5 days, they need 8,875 gallons, right? We know that within a brigade combat team, they have 10 hippos. right? So again, you're not going to slice off a half a hippo. Hey, they need almost 10,000 gallons over 5 days. That's 1 hippo per day, right? Because hippos can transport 2,000 gallons of water. And like Captain Lasky pointed out yesterday, right? If you're trying to lift a full hippo with an LHS, you're going to rip the hook arm off. Why? Because of the weight. 1 gallon of water is, I think it's 8.9 pounds per gallon. And then times that by 2,000. I can't do the math because I'm simple, but it means it's a lot. And you're going to break your freaking LHS. Right? So if you're trying to fill that thing up and try to pick it up from the ground, it's probably best to leave it on a vehicle, best to leave it on a trailer. Okay? All right. Check on learning. Again, things we went over, nothing too special. This is reminding you of how to do these calculations, right? Again, it's very simple math. This is not calculus. This is not algebra 2 with trigonometry. You don't have to, triangulate your distance from, Orion's belt back to you to figure out how many MREs Private Jarzen needs. This is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. All right, class 3. This one is going to be a little bit more complicated. You're going to get a much more thorough block of instruction, right? But class 3 works a little bit differently, right? We determine class 3 consumption 3 ways. This M1 tank, right? It's sitting there. It's not moving, but this thing is turned on. It's consuming 17.3 gallons of fuel per hour, just sitting there, right? Hey, now that M1 is moving, right? Like this is Captain H.R. McMaster, right, in 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment in the First Gulf War, moving across the Iraqi desert, blasting frickin' Iraqi tanks, right? He's moving so damn fast, he's burning almost 60 gallons per hour, just blowing through Iraqi T-72s. And I bring that up because this is the 30th anniversary of the Battle of 73 Easting. Know it, learn it, love it, because that's Army history. And it's also super cool. And that's the last great tank battle of the 20th century. Anyway, so Captain H.R. McMaster is moving across the Iraqi desert super fast. He's burning 60 gallons per hour. But hey, maybe he brings his company onto a hardball road, and because it's paved, he's burning slightly less. He's only burning about 45 gallons per hour, right? Tanks consume a lot of fuel. Bradleys consume a lot of fuel. Everything, all of these things consume lots of fuel. Your Bradleys, your M88s, your M1s, lots of fuel consumption. But basically that's how it is. How many hours across what type of terrain, what are they doing, right? That's how much fuel is being consumed. So if I have an M1 tank, let's say I'm idle for 4 hours. That's a 4. And then, Captain Jarzen all of a sudden is moving out his tank, and I'm hauling ass for another 4 hours across the country to go blow up Iraqi tanks. How much fuel am I consuming? Total.
Sir, it'd be like 296 gallons.
296. All right, so whoever just spoke, walk me through how you calculated this.
Okay, so it's 4 hours going idle, so it's 4 times 17.3.
Which got you how much?
That is 7 or 69.6.
I got 69.2. Well, let's go with that. Let's go 69.2.
Yeah. And then you take 56.6 and times that by 4 as well.
Which you get
226.4.
And then when we add these two numbers together, we get what?
You get 295.6.
Outstanding. That's how much fuel one M1 tank consumed operating for 4 hours. And all we did was simple addition, subtract, or simple addition, multiplication. Right? And one M1 tank, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, right? But one M1 tank, I believe, has a 450-gallon capacity. Right? So really, I've used about a half tank just operating for 8 hours. Right? So if I'm operating for 16 hours, I'm bone dry in that tank now. So does everybody see how we calculated that?
Yes, sir.
Cool.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, so here's a little fun exercise for you to all play around with. Right? Calculate 1 day of supply for Alpha Company using these numbers, right? I'm not going to go into it, but just says, hey, Alpha Company has 14 Bradleys, Bravo Company has 14 Bradleys, Charlie Company has 14 M1 Abrams tanks. And then here's the number of hours that they're idle, here's the number of hours that they're moving. And then you, again, just like how we did on the last slide, you do those same calculations. And this is how much you get. 1,400 gallons can be transported by one M978 or one TRM. Both have capacities of 2,375 gallons with expansion. All right. We're not going too in depth, but it's important for you to know. Right. But just like I said at the very beginning, you're not going to sit there and tell that maneuver commander, hey, sir, hey, ma'am, you need 1,400 gallons of fuel. Great. That sounds like a lot. They're just going to like throw a grapefruit at your face and walk away. Right. You can say, hey, sir, ma'am, we need another day of, you have 1 day of supply left for this battalion. Okay, great. That tells me something as a maneuver commander. That tells me, hey, I probably need to program in some time to stop so that way I can get a resupply into my tanks. Right? Remember that from the beginning. Don't tell them, hey, this is how many gallons, this is how many MREs. Sir, ma'am, this is how many pencils do you have? Wow, that sounds like a lot of pencils. And they're just going to take it, sharpen it, and then stab you right in the face. Right? They need to know days of supply. And it's just the same thing. Right? All right, so summary. We talked about log stats. We talked about how to calculate some commodities. Does anybody have any questions? I know it's a lot. Hold on, there's something showing up in the chat. It's annotated. So, oh yeah, okay. It's from way back, sorry. So I know it's a lot. You learned a lot today, and your brains are probably fried. Some of you are probably sleeping. All right. The important thing is you were able to see between what Captain Jarzen taught you today and what I've taught you as well. You're able to see how truly vast logistics is spread out across a battlefield and everything that's required to support that soldier in the foxhole. Right? It's very complicated. So if you're ever feeling sour about, well, I'm just a transporter, or I'm an ordnance officer, I'm just a quartermaster officer, don't ever feel sour about it. Because this is literally the most important job in the Army because you allow the Army to continue to exist in the field. That soldier, that 11 Bravo, that 19 Alpha or 19 Kilo or 13 Alpha, they rely on you. They rely on you, and they rely on everything that you're going to bring to the fight. Their food, their water, their fuel, their ammunition, their clothes. Every single thing is going to come from you. Right? It is important. And it's important you know, just like Captain Jarzen showed you, just like I showed you, of where all this stuff comes from on the battlefield. Whether you're in a sustainment brigade, whether you're in a combat aviation brigade, whether you're in a brigade combat team, whether you're in some random unit, you know where to get your support from, you know where to get your sustainment from. Right? And it's a lot, again, it is a lot. It's a lot to know. It's a lot to take in. Your heads are probably swollen. I get it. If you have any questions in the future, don't hesitate to ask. You have my contact information. You have Captain Jarzen's. Pretty simple to get a hold of either of us. We're married, right? But if you have questions, don't be afraid to reach out, right? Specifically for transporters, right? I am not a transporter. I say this again, I'm not a transporter, but I work for some transporters. I work for the Chief of Transportation. He's Brigadier General James Smith, right? And so he is the head of the transportation proponency here at Fort Lee, which deals with literally everything transportation. So specifically to transporters, I'm talking to you. After you graduate, probably anywhere from 3 to 6 months after you graduate BOLC, I'm going to be reaching out to you to basically do a follow-up survey and interview of what did you learn in BOLC? And then what are you actually doing in your units? And did what you learn in BOLC help you in any way, shape, or form for you to be able to do your jobs in your unit, right? I've already spoken to lieutenants. Some of them had graduated in November, and they're in movement control teams in Europe. They're already in brigade combat teams getting ready to go to NTC. They're already in huge positions of responsibility, and they're already, like, I cannot understate it, hitting the ground running. So take this, do everything you can to learn, because for a lot of you, when you get to your unit, that's going to be you. You're going to be put into a staff position, you're going to be put into a platoon leader position, and it's going to be go. Go, 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 go. Don't be afraid to reach back, because I'm going to reach out to you and do a check-in. Hey, how are you doing? What did you learn? Is it helping you? What can we do to bridge that knowledge gap? So I don't have anything else. Does anybody have any last questions before I turn this over to other Captain Jarzen?
Yes, sir. Second Lieutenant Butts.
Yes.
I was just asking. I know we got a lot of good content today. I was just asking are we going to know specifically what may be on the test, or is it just a toss up?
Yes. Life is testable.
Oh, sir.
Anybody else? Okay. All right. I understand everybody. It's late. You've had a long day of learning. Again, if you have questions, you can shoot me an email. You can send me a chat on MS Teams. Again, I'm more than happy to share any knowledge, any products. I'm more than happy to go over anything that we went over today. Anything that Captain Jarzen went over with you today, I'm happy to go over it with you as well. Right? So if there's nothing else, I'll turn it over to Captain Jarzen. Captain Jarzen.
Captain Jarzen, thank you, Captain Jarzen. Hey everyone. So I don't have anything, but except I do need both class leaders, both class XOs, both class S3s, and both class academic officers. I need to stand fast, so we can go over for next week's go plan.
and what is expected. Because now on Monday we are still under quarantine, but on Tuesday it's 100% we're back in the classrooms. And so I want to discuss admin notes, okay, with those key personnel that I just mentioned. But other than that, everyone should have my contact information if you want to go over trains. I love trains. I love it because that's what makes a good logistician. If you know trains, then that's 95% of the battle, right? If you want to deep dive into it more, you guys have my contact information. So don't be shy. But other than that, everyone have a great weekend. Watch some Korean drama on Netflix. I highly recommend Crash Landing on You. That's my #1 favorite.
That's so good.
And my second one is Itaewon.
Kingdom, man.
What's that?
Kingdom.
Oh, I don't like the actors. That's just me, but I'll give
Maybe
it a
it was
chance.
horrible, but other than that, it was good.
But definitely watch Crash Landing on You. Oh my God, I cried for like 3 days straight, and this was during quarantine. I would binge watch until 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, take a 2-hour nap and wake up again, and just repeat for 3 days straight. But anyways, love that show. But everyone can drop off, and everyone have a great weekend, except for those key personnel. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Captains Jarzen.
Thank you, man.
Take it, man.
Thank you.